All right, let's create an HDR image from Lensbaby Images. Here I have 3 images. These are bracketed exposures. And if I look at my metadata, the first image was shot as the camera saw it with the exposure the camera saw, 0 EV compensation. The second image has -2 EV compensation, which underexposed the scene and is going to get my cloud detail. The third image is overexposed by 2 EV, 2 exposure values, and this is going to bring the detail into my shadow area. So to create an HDR image in Lightroom, I select the 3 images. Now I have already installed the Nick Google collection, which installs HDR effects as a Lightroom plugin. So to get HDR effects to do its magic, I simply choose File, Export, and then under Google, I choose HDR FX 2. And Lightroom will render the images as TIFF images with the ProPhoto RGB color space, which gives me the most color gamut at 16 bits per component. So in other words, I've got a lot of data to work with. I'm going to get hopefully some awesome results. So when I click Export, Lightroom will process the photos. Now this may take a little while, so we have to be patient and wait. And once the images are processed, the HDR FX 2 workspace will open. Actually, that's HDR FX Pro 2. Okay, now here's our workspace, and the images are loaded, but I have a warning that each image is missing exposure data. And this is because the Lensbaby does not communicate with the camera. In other words, HDR FX doesn't know what f-stop these images were taken at, even though I did bracket them by 2 exposures. Now the fact that I know that I bracketed each exposure by 2 EV, all I need to do is choose the EV spacing of 2 from the drop-down menu, and then choose Create HDR. And what HDR FX Pro 2 is doing is it's aligning the images and moving any ghost effects that would appear because parts of the image, parts of the scene moved between the 3 exposures. For example, if it was a windy day and these sea oats were blowing around in the breeze, it would prevent against a ghost image showing up here and here. So now my 3 images are blended, and I click this icon and I can see my presets, and I click this icon here and I can see the different panels I've got to work with and the different parameters I've got to work with to create my HDR image. Generally, I will start with a preset, and there are 28 presets in HDR FX Pro 2. I'm going to start with one of the landscape presets. There are 4 altogether. Generally, I will choose, in a situation like this, which was near sunset, I will choose one of the graduated presets, which is going to darken the sky somewhat. And I could choose graduated 1, and I've got nice detail in the shadows and nice detail in the clouds, or graduated 2, which is a little bit darker. Now in this case, I think I prefer graduated 1 more, so I'm going to choose that, and now I'm going to tweak the preset. Okay, we start with tone compression and method strength. Tone compression is one of the algorithms with HDR FX 2 that gives you either a strong image, strong HDR image with lots of detail from shadow to highlights, or this one, the image is pretty flat. It's got even detail all the way across. I like the preset, so I'm going to click that back again. I can change method strength and have stronger HDR effect or a weaker HDR effect. Now this control isn't making too much of a difference on this image. And then my HDR method, I can choose the depth. Here we're choosing normal, or we can choose strong or subtle. This image, I think normal works pretty well. Now the amount of detail, we can create a realistic image, a soft image, or go the other way and get detailed or grungy. Grungy to me is way over the top, and in fact, I don't like grungy in any HDR image, even images shot with, say, a standard non-Lensbaby lens where I've got even detail all the way across. So I'm going to go back and go with realistic. I've got drama. I can have a flat image, natural image, or deep image. Dingy, sharp, or grainy. Then these last three work pretty cool if you had a Lensbaby image, say, of a car or something like that, and you really wanted to hit the nail on the head with the HDR effect. Here, I'm just going to stick with deep. Tonality, I can increase the exposure or decrease the exposure. Now, the cool thing about HDR FX Pro is if I double click any parameter, it will return to its default value. Shadows, I can make the shadows darker or lighter. But again, I'm going to double click to stay with the default value of 0. And I can accentuate my highlights as well. Here I'm actually blowing out part of the sky. On this one, I might want to go a little bit the other way, but I'm going to show you something else I can do here in a second. I can accentuate the blacks or not. Again, I'm going to go back to the preset. Now, structure. Structure is a cool thing. Structure is like clarity in Lightroom. It takes the edges and it makes them pop. I'm going to increase the structure just a little bit. If I do that overall, it gets a little bit too much grunge into it. So I'm going to double click and go back to 0 and show you one of the cool things about HDR FX 2. In fact, any Nik software, I can add what is known as a control point. Now, when I click one of these control points and click it over the image, I can change the size of the control point. Actually, in this case, I think I'm going to leave it where it's at. Maybe just a little bit bigger. And I can change the exposure, which I don't want to do. Contrast, saturation. I am going to increase the saturation just a bit to make this area of the image pop. And now structure. The structure is going to make these sea oats pop. Now, you're saying, what area is this control point affecting? How does it know just to apply the control point to just this area? Well, the control point, the U-point technology that Nik developed for this application and a lot of their other applications is very cool because it acts like a mask. And if I click here, now it shows me exactly the area that it's affecting. And see, I can increase the structure just a little bit more. And I know it's affecting these grasses in here. I have other parameters I can affect as well. And this one I think is, method strength, so on and so forth. In fact, the way this works, I can apply just any of the parameters within the HDR FX Pro 2 to just this area, which is way cool. Now I'm going to disable the mask so I can see the whole image. Something else I can do is add a vignette to the image. The vignettes are kind of cool. And what I like to do on images like this that I end up converting to black and white is using a white frame around it. And when I create the white frame, if I open up my vignette panel there, I can increase the size of the vignette to encompass more of the image. And I'm going to go back to about right in there. Now this is about done for an HDR image, so I'm going to save it. Now there's my HDR image. Let's compare it with the image with no compensation whatsoever. You can see there's a significant difference, and I've got quite a bit more detail in this HDR image and quite a bit more punch as well. So there you have it in a nutshell, HDR FX Pro 2 in Lightroom.